Okay, welcome to today's live broadcast on eczema and psoriasis and other skin conditions. So this is a really interesting subject to talk about with mental health and other things such as EFT and the emotional root causes around that. And before I get onto that, I'm just going to share some other information with you. By the way, I'm in merry old England on holiday at the moment. As you can see, it is beautiful here. Raining in Spain, apparently, so it's gone really well. Just wish I could share the background out there, but the sun would be too bright. You might already not be able to see me very well. Out that way, it'd be shining on me, but it's beautiful yellow fields and sea views right there. It's absolutely stunning. Right, so yeah, there's a lot of information in this live stream on eczema and skin conditions, and I will be using notes because I want to make sure you get all of the information. I think that's more important than I look like a smooth and polished performer. I'm also, going to be answering any questions. If you've got any questions, hopefully I'll see them throughout. If you are here, then please comment, give me a yo, some likes, send some hearts flying through the screen. All of that stuff helps to get it out to more people, so really appreciate that. And yeah, eczema in particular is a condition which is, it's very common. It causes misery to millions of people worldwide, and it's very apparent. Yo, Donna, yeah, thanks for the yo. Hit me up with some hearts, that'd be appreciated. Uh, so yeah, it causes a lot of misery. Some people have it their entire lives. Most people who have it, it comes and goes. So hi Jan, great to have you here. From now on, if you're joining, please hit up with some hearts, some laughs, whatever, some angry reacts, whatever, as I share this information, whatever feels right for you. So eczema is, and in fact I'm covering really all skin conditions. Eczema is the most easy one to talk about from the mental health perspective because it's very apparent what's happening. But other ones, such as psoriasis, cold sores, things like that, do share some very similar characteristics as to the reasons, the biological, emotional, psychological reasons why they happen, and therefore what the resolutions might be as well. Before I actually get onto particular conditions, I want to talk to you about meta health, and I'll go into this chart in a moment. Meta health is the analytical process that we use to analyze the specific kinds of stress that were the first part of any health condition, and it is coming from the perspective, unlike modern medicine, where if something's happened, if there's a symptom, it is basically down to the body going wrong in some way. The body's seen from the Newtonian model as a collection of parts, and if something happens, it means something's gone wrong. The meta health perspective is that there is no bad health. Anything that's happening in your body is an intelligent adaptation by your body or your brain as well, trying to actually resolve something or give you a message as to something that needs to be resolved in your life, generally from specific types of traumatic events that during that time that they happened, you didn't have a strategy to deal with them, so you froze in that moment, and the body took over by carrying out an intelligent, or well, not intelligent on a logical sense, but biologically intelligent adaptation. Remember, these things go back to our prehistoric roots, because we are have still got the same biology as our ancient ancestors had. It's just we live in modern domesticated lives, which come with many benefits. The disadvantage of them is that many of us are unable to process effectively the specific traumas that have happened to us because of various things in our modern situation. For example, many people feeling isolated. It's not appropriate to just go out into the street and start shaking like an animal would do to relieve themselves of stress. So it's not. So we don't have the simple strategies to clear stress that we used to have. So our symptoms often remain in a chronic state for a long time. So how mental health actually works is every single body tissue that you have has got goes along with basically through embryonic development. As the embryo developed in the womb, different brain relays develop, starting with the brain stem, and every body tissue is related or developed at the same time as part of the brain. So the first one's the brain stem in the tiny embryo. It's really the core survival part of the brain. It relates to many of the core organs, such as the liver, parts of the lungs, parts of the reproductive system, most of the digestive system. The core survival stuff is related to the brainstem. So any traumas to do with survival tend to hit people in those sorts of organs. Then you've got the cerebellum, the second part of the brain to develop, and this associates with organs which have an association with integrity, also protection of the body. And again, there's things such as the dermis, the thick layer of skin, which isn't the one we're going to be talking about to do with eczema and the skin conditions today, but it's the sort of thick, leathery, fattier layer of skin that's protective. Also, a lot of the tissues to do with the heart, some of the breast tissues are to do with the dermis, and they're to do with integrity and protection. Then you've got the next part which develops is the skeleton and muscles, and that goes along with a part of the brain called the cerebral medulla, and this cerebral medulla and the tissues associated with it are to do with your structure, your strength, your ability to impact on the world. And it is, so these tend to be the self-devaluation traumas, where you felt, oh, I'm not strong enough to do that, I'm not brave enough to do that, I'm not as good as, I'm not good enough. And these tend to come out as muscular skeletal pain, a lot of them, as well as some other tissues. And then you've got the fourth one, which we're particularly going to be looking at today, which is the cerebral cortex. It's the higher brain. It's the last one to be developed, and in embryonic development, it comes along with the skin and the outer membranes in the body. And we're talking about the top layer of the skin, not the dermis. Talking about the epidermis. So this is just that top layer of skin where conditions such as eczema, psoriasis are apparent. And the traumas and beliefs and patterns in life that are to do with the epidermis are those to do with two main types of trauma. They are territorial conflicts and separation conflicts. And these, of course, are very common in society. People experience having their space invaded, and also these separation conflicts, which are particularly the cause of the eczema symptoms. So now I'm just going to go through this diagram. Got two phases. Got two phases on here, and I just want to go through these. So I'm just getting used to the angle and seeing myself on the camera, going backwards here. Right. Okay. So you start in normal health. A stressful event happens, or it can either be the initial event or it could be the trigger, and then you go along, and you're in stress. And during this time, um, the body is carrying out adaptations, but they're not always apparent. But what is happening is you tend to have things like obsessive thinking about whatever the problem is, and a higher level of energy in order to resolve the problem. So think when a trauma happens, in prehistoric times, you would be looking at you'd be looking at how to resolve it. So your body would go into high energy mode. A lot of people remain in stress for a lot of their lives these days, and which is why when people get chronic conditions, they become correspondingly worse when they go into the regeneration phase. So you have a point of acceptance, where something happens that causes you to partially or fully accept whatever's happened, and then you go into regeneration. Generally, people become tired in this stage, and it's often when physical symptoms really start to appear. So this is often when people go to doctors, and in the case of eczema, they would get a cream to put on, and it actually would cause them to become stressed. The steroids put your body back into a form of stress, and then you end up back in the stress phase, and then something would re-trigger the eczema again and go back into actually experiencing it again. You can then get what's a healing peak, so temporarily stressing the body. This is often known as a healing crisis, but in this case, it is with cortex issues. It's often things like a temporary loss of memory or something like that, which you don't necessarily really notice. Then you go back to a lesser phase of regeneration where your body is returning back to normal, and then going into health. Now, with skin conditions and in the epidermis, the symptoms actually really show up the strongest in regeneration. So, as I said before, with eczema, we are looking at separation conflicts. So, something that causes separation, conflict can happen, but you've got the whole stress phase beforehand where you don't really notice the physical symptoms. You might notice that your skin's a bit dry, a bit thinner, might be a bit paler than usual. But the real pain and itching, annoyance, etc., comes when you go into this sort of regeneration time. Okay, and the interesting thing about this is that it's not a one-time thing. For most people, you tend to get stuck in this, in the pattern of going into stress, being triggered, and then it going into regeneration again. So what does that mean? That means people come into and out of regeneration symptoms. Slightly windy here, so I'm having to put my paper underneath the shelf so it doesn't blow away. Okay, right, so yeah, it's a chronic process, eczema. And by the way, this is similar for things like psoriasis, but I'll come on to that being a bit different later on. I might see there's a few comments on here. Just one moment. Okay, so right, so you've got a separation conflict happens. Something might happen. I'll come on to some examples of what might have been in a bit. The body goes into that stress phase, but then a partial acceptance might happen. So this could be maybe if your separation was not seeing someone for a long time, you might end up catching them again, might see them again or be reminded of them, and something happens so that you don't feel as bad about the separation in some way, or you accept the separation in some way. It could be a negative type of acceptance, like, oh, I'll never see them again, and then actually just making peace with that in some way, and then you end up with the going into that regeneration phase, and people can get into that stress and regeneration phase over again. And you're going into the stress phase where you've got the pale, dry, colder skin. It's less sensitive because it's thinned, and the biological adaptation here is trying to make the pain of separation less by the missing the touch, etc. Less. It can also be a type of separation conflict where you are trying to push away from something, like it's something you don't want something to happen, so not to be touched by someone or something or a situation, in which case the thinning of the skin is to do with numbing the pain of that happening, numbing yourself to that happening. But then the acceptance point happens, you accept whatever it is, go into regeneration. That's when the red, angry, painful, itchy skin happens. Hypersensitive, often. I'll come on to a specific example in a moment. And what happens is people have had, if people have had a separation conflict, let's say it was they split up with a partner after many years, and they accept it after a while, but then they see something that reminds that person of their ex, and then again that triggers them back into the stress because they start the thought patterns again. Then they go into the regeneration pattern, the eczema happens, and then they're just going in and out of that stress and regeneration cycle. So I can show it on this bit of paper at the moment. You've got the stress here, triggered, see something that reminds them of their ex-partner. Again, accept that they're not going to go back with them or whatever. Then the eczema kicks in. So it's not during the stressful phase, it's during the acceptance and regeneration phase that the actual painful eczema symptoms kick in. But you can be triggered in and out of that over and over again. And with skin conditions, it's really common for them to be lots of subtle triggers that remind you of the separation object or person, and keep triggering people on a chronic basis over and over again into something happening. It basically going into the stress and regeneration cycle. So as I said before, it's either a longing for touch, a type of separation where you're missing someone's touch or missing something. It could be a place, you could be missing your old home, if moving abroad or something like that. Or it can be a resistance type of separation where you don't want to be touched, where you want to be left alone. You don't want to feel whatever you're feeling, like you're trying to get away from something. They can both lead to eczema, but they'll be happening in different parts of the body, different locations on the skin. And the resolution is to actually get to a point where the separation conflict is no longer bothering you, either where you feel reconnected with someone or truly make peace with the fact that that's not going to happen again. And when you see or experience the triggers, they no longer affect you anymore. Or it could be that you've made peace with or no longer need to get away from a situation or person, whatever they are. So I want to give you an example now, which example of somebody I worked with, and they were two. They had eczema all over their body, and it got to a point where they couldn't even pick up their baby son for a cuddle because they were so hypersensitive, in so much pain. And the only thing that would work for them, they tried loads of natural remedies. The steroid cream would give them some temporary relief, but of course it was just pushing them back into that stress phase. And then unfortunately they go back into regeneration biologically, and they would just find that they were getting all the symptoms over and over again. So we worked exploring in the first session. Actually, all we did, so it's a great symptom treatment, is EFT. EFT tapping is brilliant because you can get actually into the symptoms and work on the emotions within the feeling, within the physical sensations of the eczema. So in this case, his eczema was bright red, and he identified that there was anger in there. And within that first session, his skin actually went from red, it's still lumpy and still very much the eczema was apparent, but it went from a very dark red color to a very soft pink, more like skin color. And all his itching went away. So from then on, he had a technique that he could use to basically stop feeling any pain, any itch from his eczema. I'm not saying 100%, but it would go. He could get it down from a 9 or 10 out of 10 in terms of pain and itchiness and redness and soreness, down to a 3 or a 4, much better. So he could then get on with his day and do the things that he wanted to do, play with his son, etc. That was great. But then in the following sessions, we identified a very strong separation conflict, which was a full separation from self related to him and his family when he was younger. And through clearing that, his symptoms really started to go very quickly, so that by the end of 4 sessions, it virtually had no eczema left on his body at all. And I know that now 4 years later, it still hasn't come back. So that was amazing that he was able to totally resolve through clearing these emotional root causes, and also have a technique to be able to clear the eczema on a day-by-day basis, or rather the symptoms. So symptom treatment with EFT, and then using Meta Health and matrix re-imprinting, able to find and resolve the root cause. So that was really cool. Now, it's not always as simple as that, because there are often other factors involved, which I'll come on to in a minute, but you can get some really good outcomes just with EFT alone, and by simply finding and clearing these separation root causes. And the great thing about working with things like eczema is you can really see whether it's working, because it's all happening on the outside of the body. But just some other examples. A child, is some examples of other mental health practitioner examples. A 4-year-old child suffering from her parents separating, and loss of touch from her father. And whenever she visits him, and that's the acceptance point, so every time she sees her father, her skin flaring up with dermatitis. So quite similar to the one before, because again, it's the entire body flaring up, that total separation, which often happens when things are very major, when they happen to you at a young age. Often I've seen this happening with people who've moved abroad for work, or for whatever reason, and they're getting a lot of separation from family, from their old life, etc. And that can be the sort of thing that triggers eczema or a psoriasis pattern. And they can be a bit more metaphorical. So an example from another mental health practitioner is a fisherman who retired, and he developed psoriasis on his head, lower back, lower legs and hands. And these were areas which, when he was enjoying his job, I guess his job was a key part of his personality, very important to him. He found, basically, he got psoriasis on the areas that his heavy fisherman's clothing had been touching and causing his body to sweat all the way through his working life. Of course, that was the stressful times. It's a very stressful job, being a fisherman out in storms and things like that. And then when he came into when he retired, he went into regeneration, because he was no longer having to do those things anymore. So these are the sorts of some examples of the sort of detective work that you might need to do to find these root causes just want to say psoriasis is a bit more complex than eczema. With eczema, you normally find that there's one separation conflict going on for each part of the body that's affected by the eczema. Now, it can be one for the whole body, or it can be separate ones for different parts of the body, relating to slightly different aspects of separation. With psoriasis, there's generally one of those, at least one, longing for separation going on, so missing touch, and one wanting to push away from, and they can even be of the same person. So it could be missing your ex-partner, missing an ex-partner, but also being angry with them by the way they treated you. So wanting to both missing their touch and also wanting to push away from them could cause that sort of thing. Could be something that leads to psoriasis. Now, one of the challenges that we get with this and many things is in mental health is people say, well, how do babies get these conditions? How do very young children who get these things, how can they be born with them, or they're determined to be born with them? Well, first of all, are they actually born with it, or have they experienced a very early separation conflict? One example is babies often get eczema on their cheeks after they stop breastfeeding for a little while. So, you know, you can imagine the cheeks have got that contact with mum during breastfeeding, and then after they stop breastfeeding and once they've accepted they're not getting that anymore, that might not be a very pleasant acceptance, then the eczema might come along, and they might be getting constantly re-triggered by it through seeing mum, being with mum all the time. That's one example. But if they were born with conditions, then, you know, babies pick up mum's emotions in the womb without any understanding of the context as to why they're feeling those things. So in a case of mum having, you know, an argument with father, or it could, you know, or something, you know, something really sad happened, like, you know, father died, and all the shock and the separation conflict around that, then the baby could pick up all of those signals epigenetically without actually having the context for them, and they could be born, you know, potentially could be born with eczema. Can be ancestral patterns. You know, loads of information now about how we carry on our parents and our parents' parents patterns in the after things happen in the womb. I've just seen, is cradle cap conditions considered a skin condition then? I don't think I don't know, actually, because I'm not medically trained. I think cradle cap is something that pretty much all babies get. Now, perhaps it is a separation anxiety going on there, because they've got the you know, it's the top of the head relates to separation from source. So what we're talking about there is, you know, if the separation from the mother, of course, and maybe does cradle cap happen at about 3 months? I think it does. I think that's when it happened with my two. They are, so yeah, it could be a separation that we almost all of us go through, because the first 3 months after being born is considered to be that 4th trimester time. So it could be that after that, that's when they have the acceptance, and then the symptom comes about. And also there is a release of specific release of hormones goes on then, so to have to look into that in more detail. But it is something that generally only happens once. It's not a chronic pattern that it keeps coming back. You don't see cradle cap happening over and over again, I don't think. So you know, if something happens once and then clears, that's natural. That is how things are supposed to be. It's when we get stuck in the chronic conditions that it can be a problem. So but an ancestral pattern I want to talk about was a client who, and this was cold sore, but it was it doesn't, cold sores can be in the epidermis as well, and in regeneration is when they actually appear. And this was related to actually when we did the matrix session, the client went back to got a very strong memory of their mum being not kicked out of home, but having a big argument and leaving home at quite an early age. So a big separation there, which came through as a sort of ancestral pattern memory. And after resolving it, the cold sore went away, very, very quickly, like within 24 hours, which is a much quicker than they normally do. So that was really interesting. So a question here: does C-section have anything to do with mother-baby separation? Well, of course it could do. You can have some beautiful, very well planned, holistic style, even in hospital. Well, they're all in hospital C-sections, of course, but you're seeing increasingly there's a lot more effort to make them a very calm and soothing environment. But an emergency one, for example, could cause a separation thing. Interestingly, C-section babies are often more adaptable in life, and if there's a pattern of this, and they can be quicker to be able to adapt to new situations because they had this very sudden event happening, and we tend to play out our birth story throughout our lives. That's a subject for another live stream, really, but it's a good subject. So I might well do a live stream around birth stories and patterns if people want that in upcoming weeks. But lots of things. So that could be an example of a mother-baby separation. But this one was really interesting because it was an adult, but they went back to a pattern of before they were even born, or even existed in the womb, and found this historic event. And by clearing that, it resolved that pattern. Okay, right. So I just want to give you some examples of some specific skin areas and what they might mean. So, as I said earlier, the cheeks. If you're getting eczema on the cheeks, then that's missing the pattern that's being triggered and accepted is wanting to touch something with the cheek. So, in that case of babies with the breastfeeding, that would be an example there. Eyelids, a separation related to not seeing somebody, for a visual loss of touch, it would be considered, and it could cause eczema around the eyelids, which is quite common, or a fear that someone's going to disappear, that could lead to it as well. The head is that separation relating to the head. It can either be missing that sort of touch on the head, like being rubbed on the head by your dad or whatever, or it could be it can also be a disconnection from source. People have experienced it as a disconnection from spirit or whatever people are perceiving. It can cause that the scalp style eczema, or often psoriasis conditions in that case. Mouth might be to do with kissing or a malfunction, or wanting to remove something disgusting, such as a dirty glass, seeing a glass was really dirty or something like that. Or it can also be a territorial thing, like not daring to say something. Generally they're separation, but we can have separation and territorial conflicts are very similar, and epidermis things are triggered within them. So so you can always look at those sort of territorial things as well. Soles of the feet, not feeling grounded, or having an acceptance around not feeling grounded, and then those eczemas can kick in there. I actually had that once. I did once suffer from eczema, but it went through one cycle and went away over a period of time. It might be interesting for me to look at what was going on then and actually explore that. But the key thing is, it's actually what the body location means to that individual. Generally, if it's the front of the body, so like the huggy bits, it's a separation, missing of touch sort of thing. If it's the back of the body, the shoulders, the back, the elbows, it's a wanting to push away from. And you can have multiple of these things going on, leading to different areas being affected. Could all still stem from one core event, could have multiple events implicated within it. But what does that body location mean to you, mean to the client? These are really key things. Right, okay, so lower leg areas, someone's just asked. Well, that could be, it depends if it's on the front or the back, or it could be, I believe, the back of the knee. Yeah, so if it's your front of your knee, might be wanting to knee someone away from you. If it's the back of the knee, might be wanting to grip on tightly, in the same way as the inner elbow can be wanting to grip on tightly to somebody. If it is if it's the feet, or maybe the shins or whatever, it might be wanting to push away or kick away something. So it's all metaphorical, but yeah, it's good to explore it to understand what's going on. And really key is what it means to you, whether you're in stress or regeneration. Okay, so right, hands and wrist. Hands can be either not having been quick enough to be able to grab someone and pull them close. These could be, there's lots of different ways, lots of meanings for these things. Wanting to bat something away, on the wrist, that's quite a sensitive area, so that's likely to be a missing touch of some sort, missing. And again, it doesn't have to be of an individual. It could be missing your school. It could be missing where you used to live. So many different things. But it's just about understanding the and looking into the emotions within them as well, and then using that information to understand the events where you felt that, which were related to separation issues. Okay, so yeah, I mean, with each area, yeah, just it's really key that it's about what it means to you as an individual. There are guidelines and some indications in the sort of mental health manual, but it is, there's so many. Everyone interprets things individually. The key thing is to heal the separation conflict, and whether that is healing the past events, that can be important, but also I'm really a big fan of changing the perspective in the now, and therefore changing the future that you're going to have as a result of that. So yeah, so leads on to the Soulutions, which is it could be having a full acceptance, so that you no longer feel triggered when you think about the ex-partner or the children who've moved over to Australia or whatever it is. You just think of it with kindness and warmth, and you've made peace with whatever the situation is, and seeing the best aspects of it. It could be, yeah, feeling truly connected. So what if you, hey Ian, good to see you here, I'll see you later on. And yeah, so let's say you lost contact with your parents or child, or your best friend, you fell out with them or whatever, then perhaps truly reconciling and making peace could be a great way of resolving this, as these are the natural resolutions where you complete the cycle. You're no longer holding that pattern anymore, and it is and it's yeah, it's been resolved. You're no longer being triggered with the sort of chronic pattern anymore, basically. If you've moved abroad, and you're feeling a separation from your old community, it could be something like finding finding peace and finding some good friendships and getting involved in the new community, this might be a solution. So many different solutions in the world that you can make. But also, really key, as I talked about earlier, is resolving the feelings. So it could be clearing the suppressed anger, as with the guy I talked about earlier. Once he released the anger, first of all, his eczema became much softer, less painful, red, etc. The sadness around the separation, all of these things. And to do that, well, I just love EFT for this. There's other techniques out there, NLP, hypnosis, etc. But I think nothing gets into the emotions as effectively as EFT and all the tapping techniques, whether that's provocative energy techniques, matrix re-imprinting, whatever. But resolving the emotional aspects can be super powerful. And what I love about working with people with eczema is you can see this happening in their life. They often feel different at the end of a session. The body, the redness has turned pink. It's not as itchy. These sorts of things. I think really one of the beauties of meta health is that we look at intervention. So if you can't change the situation in your life, which is what the body's trying to tell you, you can change the way you react to it through clearing the emotional responses, changing the hormonal mix, etc. that happens, clearing the epigenetic triggers. So then you are able to you're able to move forwards, no longer triggered by the things that were triggering the chronic pattern of eczema. Now, I mentioned babies before, and in this case, you can do tapping with babies super gently on your own child, and not really tapping, just lightly touching the points. And because babies are totally present moment, you don't have to dig around for the traumas, of course. You can just help it. You can just touch the points. Don't do the top of the head where they haven't, the skull hasn't come together yet. But I think tapping has been great with both of my babies when they were little. Just super light touch on like the chin, the collarbone, the fingers, tapping on the fingers. It's great for sleep and things like that. And it might give them some relief from any symptoms if they've got them going on. But really, what you want to do is work with the mum, or maybe the mum and dad. And the reason for that is that the babies are very involved in the parents' energy fields, still picking up a lot from what's going on in that family dynamic, of course. So I've seen great results. People working with one of my colleagues. I can't remember her name right now. Hopefully it'll come to me. But she posted some pictures not that long ago of a baby who had head to toe eczema, and she did some work with the mum. And again, it was one of those situations where the skin went from red to pink very, very quickly. And Susan Kennard, that's who it was. And it was a really, really nice story of showing how you can, by working with a parent, it can have great results for the child. So I really think that. So of course, there's some topical treatments you might want to use. I'm not really going to cover those. There's herbal oils, whatever, that you can use. If it's awful, use the steroid cream too, because you can still work on the emotional stuff going on underneath while using medicines to resolve the symptoms temporarily that are going on, so you're not in pain and agony you're then able to concentrate more on actually resolving the things that are going on. So really it's either resolve the environmental factors, the social factors, and resolve the especially the emotional, and by that I mean the past events, the beliefs holding it in place, the I'm separate from, etc. It's not safe to be touched. These sort of codependency things. I'm emotionally independent and feel strong without them. I can choose when contact happens. So all of those sorts of, whatever the beliefs are, clearing the beliefs, clearing the behavior patterns that are leading to separation, these are the best solutions for permanent resolution to eczema. I'm very happy to answer any questions if you've got them. It's great. I'm seeing the comments, at least on the main feed here. If I haven't got to your question, I'll answer it in the comments after the live stream finishes. So if you're typing any questions or whatever about eczema or psoriasis or any skin condition, and I might be able to answer it here. But just want to say, if you or someone you know is struggling with the pain and inconvenience of these conditions, they might have been told that they're going to have them forever. They're going to keep coming back, and all they can do is manage them. They can absolutely resolve them. And I'd be very happy to have a quick chat with anyone, 15-20 minutes, about how they can learn how to heal themselves and how I can guide them to do that. So thanks very much for your time. Thank you all for joining. Hit me up with some heart reacts, some likes, some angry reacts if you feel that way, some laughs, some wows, whatever you want to do. It'd be great to see them come through. And yeah, just as I said, if you've got any questions or would like to have a chat about any of this, if I resolve psoriasis, would it resolve psoriatic arthritis? Well, I would be looking at that at the different. I would look at those things. They might be similar. They might even come from the same root cause, but I'd be looking at the arthritis symptoms separately, as they depending on where they are in the body, which joints, etc. They're generally going to be around self-devaluation stuff could be involved in there, because it's happening in the musculoskeletal system. Yeah, so they're separate but could be related. Often you can find that, and we do this thing called non-linear analysis, where we look at all of the different symptoms going on and look at the links between them and find what's happening there. And by doing that, you can get some amazing resolutions just with any form of emotional work. There's many ways in, so you might, but if you go in, for example, with money issues, resolve the fear and the blocks around money, they might be the same core beliefs which are leading to pain in the body as well, self-devaluation pain or digestive issues, because so there's all the symptoms, whether they're psychological or physical, can have similar root causes around the beliefs. So when you actually find them, release the beliefs, resolve them, then you've got a great way to move forwards. Okay, so if there's any more questions, I'll be very happy to answer them. Otherwise, thank you all so much for joining me today. Yeah, get in touch if you want to have a further chat about any of this, find out how it relates to you or your loved ones or anyone you know. Yeah, and I'm also happy to answer questions in the Feel Better group or in the comments below this video. So, right, okay, okay, yeah, thanks for being here, Jane. Pleasure to have you here. I'm going to call that to an end now. So, Sam, EFT now. Have an amazing day. Have a beautiful Easter weekend. I hope you have a great time. Lots of love. Over and out.